Good morning, everyone. So, since speaking to Daniela in terms of what I should be teaching, and so since this is the last session before Chanuka, and we're not having the shiurim next week, so I figured that might have done this next week if there was the Chanuka shiur. But okay, so this is we'll do it now. I know that the last week, the shiur after. The second shiur, so the question of Ner Chanuka was the focus of the shiur, and so my focus will not be on Ner Chanuka. The first, you look at the first Makorot, you say, oh, it's the same shiur. Well, you'll tell me if it's the same shiur. I didn't listen to the tape, so I don't know, but I don't think it'll be the same shiur. In fact, I want to start not from those first Makorot, which I'm going to get back to, but from where I want to focus, namely the question with regard to travelers, to the question with regard to being away from home, and how do you define what home is, and how to, at least for halacha, and that's how to define home. That's a really big topic. But the and how and we'll hopefully get to the nature of the mitzvah of Ner Chanuka from that angle. So let's look at section 2. It's on page 2, where it says Achsanai, and we'll start from there. Roman numeral 2, number 9, and we'll start from there, and we'll work our way backward and then forward, and hopefully somewhere along the line we'll get to where we want to be. So the Gemara tells us a very funny, or I shouldn't say funny is not in the ha-ha sense, but strange halacha, if I can say so myself. And that is the following. The Gemara is here and there are 3 daf which are concentrated dealing with the halachot of Chanuka, has been mentioned in different contexts. The Mishnah only has one reference to Ner Chanuka. There's no Mesechet Chanuka. There's not even a perek which you could connect with. Let's say the Rambam, for example, puts the halachot of Chanuka together with the halachot of Purim. It has 4 prakim. The first 2 prakim deal with what he calls Megillah v'Chanukah. So the Megillah is the first 2 prakim, deals with the halachot of Purim. And the following 2 prakim, Gimel and Daled, he has halachot of Chanuka, and also, interestingly enough, the halachot of Hallel. In other words, all of the halachot of Hallel he puts with Chanuka, another shiur. But there's no parallel in the Mishnah. There's no, we're all familiar from Friday night with Perek, the second Perek of Masechet Shabbat, Bameh Madlikin. So there is a whole Perek in Masechet Shabbat dedicated to Ner Shabbat. But there isn't any parallel where you have even one Mishnah that's dedicated to the halachot of Ner Chanuka. There are several references to Chanuka with regard to things like Al Hanisim, prayers of Chanuka, but nothing with regard to Ner Chanuka, with one exception. That exception is in Gemara in Baba Kama, Mishnah, which deals with if a camel goes by laden with flax, and the flax goes up in flames, right? Because the storekeepers would put torches or whatever outside their stores. So who's responsible? Is it the responsibility of the property owner, or is it the responsibility of the camel driver, right? And the Mishnah differentiates between if it's just a regular candle or if it was Ner Chanuka that was outside, right? That's the extent that Ner Chanuka gets in the Mishnah, right? Nothing else. And there's been a lot of literature. It's a very interesting topic. You can, with a little Googling, you can find some very interesting articles dealing through the history of why did Rabbi Yehuda Nasi basically ignore the mitzvah of Ner Chanuka. Different theories. But within the perek of Bameh Madlikin that deals not with Ner Chanuka but with Ner Shabbat, so the Gemara makes the connection. Ner Shabbat, Ner Chanuka, and has several dapim in the Gemara from Daf Chaf Aleph through Daf Chaf Daled, where the Gemara talks about specifically concentrates the halachot of Ner Chanuka, and in that discussion, the Gemara brings the following question. This is source number 9. Amar Rav Sheshet, Achsanai chayav b'ner Chanuka. A person who is a guest has a boarder has a responsibility to light Ner Chanuka. Amar Rabbi Zera. So Rabbi Zera says, Meresh, from the beginning, ki havina be'Rav. When I was a student in the house of Rav, and it was a yeshiva bacher, mishtatafna beprite bahadei ushpiza. So we would give a pruta, we would give the smallest coin. Today, it's, generally translated as a penny, but in terms of perhaps its monetary value, it's a little bit more than that. Maybe today, a nickel. It's about 20 agarot or so. Give or take. Together to our host, to the innkeeper, the ushpiza, in order to participate in the mitzvah. In other words, there was one Chanukiah, we'll call it, being lit. In order to participate, so we would give our, we would contribute a little bit, just the minimum amount. In many areas of halacha, pruta is considered to be the minimum, the smallest amount which is relevant for a transaction. So we were purchasing a little bit of the oil, a little bit of the wick. We were partners as such, so that his Chanukiah was our Chanukiah. Okay. Batar dinisibe. Once I became married, Batar dinisibe itata. Once I married a woman, Amina, I said, Hashda, now, Vaday lo tzrichana. Now I can save my pruta. I don't have to pay, a pruta. Dekamadlike alai bigo betai. Because she is lighting for me in our home. In other words, when I was a yeshiva bacher and I'm living in the dorms or whatever it is, okay, so I have to contribute to that. That's my home. But now my home is back wherever. In other words, he might have been away from home for several months. That's what people would do. But nevertheless, the knowledge that my wife is lighting for me at home is sufficient. Okay.
Can't you just read that they were away for a whole year sometimes learning?
Right. It could be.
Now that I'm still learning there, when I'm married, I'm not throwing in the money.
No, but the point is, what is strange about this halacha and is unique?
No, it's
the fact that I'm sorry.
It's to buy it.
Okay, so we'll get to it. So, but it's so you're saying it as though it's something which is obvious, and you might be right, but it's not. But it's not so obvious. In other words, here I am, right in, let's say, Yerushalayim. I live in Efrat, so I'm staying the night in my yeshiva in Yerushalayim, and the fact that someone back in Efrat is lighting the candle, right? That is Yotzei that mitzvah. In other words, there's no other equivalent to it. Whereas you could have, for example, you have mitzvah of the tzibur. So to read the Megillah is a mitzvah of the tzibur. But I still have to be part of the tzibur. I can't say that tzibur is reading the Megillah, I was Yotze. I have to hear the Megillah. I could say, okay, there's a mitzvah in the house to ner ish ubeito. But I should be able to, I have to be in the house. What it means is you need one candle or one Chanukiah. We'll talk about that in a minute. But I have to be there. I have to see it. I have to say Amen. How can I? I can't just simply be a member of the household far away. But that's exactly what Rabbi Zera seems to say. Yeah. I'm sorry. But it doesn't say that he appointed him as her a shaliach. And generally speaking, when we talk about a shaliach, and this will come up in the halach, can I appoint someone else who's not exactly part of my household to light the Chanukiah for me? In other words, to make a shaliach mitzvah, we don't say that when it comes to mitzvot of the guf. We don't say, okay, I'm going to appoint a shaliach to put on tefillin for me. I'm going to appoint a shaliach to shake the lulav for me.
Listen to the shofar.
What?
Listen to the shofar.
Or to listen to the shofar, right? It was even there, and I was maybe I'll appoint someone to, if there's a need to do a mitzvah which isn't on me. It's like I could appoint a shaliach to do the brit milah for my son. Okay, but because the object of the mitzvah is the child, right? I can't. It would be interesting to be able to to appoint a shaliach mitzvah to do my own brit milah. No, it's like that would be, but we don't say that. What?
The key is to make sure that presuming it's
Okay, so again, all I'm trying to say is that it's strange that I can do the Pirsum Hanes with on autopilot, and it doesn't even sound as though that he told her when he left. It was just saying, I know she's lighting, so since she's lighting, I'm Yotzei. Okay, so we have to talk about this. Now, this is the halacha which is brought in the Shulchan Aruch. The question of where to light and how to light. So first of all, before we get to that part, let's talk about the other part. What does it mean that I participate in the light? Let's say there's no one lighting at my home, right? I'm the yeshiva bacher again. So now, what does it mean that I become part of that household, right, with a little pruta? So the Shulchan Aruch here, number 10, Achsanai shem medlikin alav beveito. Tzarich latei pruta lebal habayit lishtatef imo b'shemen shel ner Chanuka. So if again you have a boarder who is no one is lighting for him in his home, so then he has to give a pruta to the house owner in order to join with him in the oil of the ner Chanuka. V'im yesh lo petach patuach la'atzmo. But if he has his own room and he has his own door, tzarich lahadlik bepitcho. So then he has to light his own menorah. Af al pi shoto bayit eno miyuchad el l'shena. Even though that part of the house, that room, is only for sleeping. V'hu ochel al shulchan bal habayit. And he's eating it's a bed and breakfast. So has his own room, but the food is being served at the communal table. Just mention that it wasn't all uncommon. Even if a few months ago I was reading Moby Dick, right? So something from the 19th century, right? And in the opening chapters, so Ismail, call me Ishmael. So he describes in New Bedford, Connecticut, how he's not only sharing a room with someone who he becomes shipmates with, a harpooner, but he has to share a bed with him. It was under the kind of conditions which we would find just impossible to imagine. Those were standard. In other words, you were very lucky to get your own room, right? We'll say you were very lucky to get your own bed. You were really lucky to get your own room. Right? So this is just something which you should keep in mind. I don't know how many stars people would have given on that particular inn. V'hu adin leben ha'ochel eitz halaviv. And the similar halacha applies to a child, well, not really a child, a young man who is eating in his father's household, but he has his own room. V'yesh omrim, debizman shahazeh shemadlikim bifnim mamash. So this is now the Ramah speaking, but he's quoting an earlier tshuva of the Rashba from the 13th century. So he says, the bizman hazeh shemadlikim bifnim mamash yadlik b'makom she'ochel v'chein nahagu. In other words, now, if you are today where people only light inside, so then you should not light at your own hotel room, but rather you should, this type of hotel, but you should light in the dining room. Just halacha and we'll just before we get to this. So that means, and this is how it plays out in a lot of hotels. In other words, basically, if you're staying in a hotel over Chanuka, so then today we do get our own rooms, right? And we'll only share our beds with people we want to share them with. But if unless you have grandchildren climbing in. But in any event, but be that as it may, but if you have but where do people light? So to a large extent, it's also governed by fire regulations. But the idea of lighting either in the communal areas, namely in the dining room, or in an area designated in the lobby. So that is basically this halacha that's being stated here.
You still have to light.
Right? There are those who, yes, you should. Whereas you could, theoretically, as if you were to know, very few people do that today. Whereas if you were dealing, certainly in a hotel situation, if you're dealing in a household situation, right? So then, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this in a moment. If you wanted to give the Baal HaBayit a small amount of money to become a partner with him, or her for that matter, so then you can do that. But as I said, the general practice of lighting the Chanukiyot and people having their own Chanukiyot, maybe one per family, sometimes even more than that, depends on the nature of the hotel, how much room they give you to set up. So that is grounded in this, namely because you have your own room, and you have basically you're renting the room. So from a halachic perspective, it's yours.
Right.
So then you could theoretically light it outside the room door, but the idea of doing it where people eat is generally allowed. There are poskim who say that today, if fire regulations allow, again, important that to add that caveat, if fire regulations allow, it's preferable to light in your room in the hotel. Because this is your space. Okay? Fine. However, continuing the halacha l'masa aspect of the shir. So the number 11, the Mishnah Berurah points out something which a lot of people aren't familiar with, or if they are familiar with, they're not necessarily careful about. Makom she'ochel, makom achilato ikar. Here, when it becomes a question trying to define residence, so sleeping is considered secondary to eating. By the way, just another area where we see this is the idea of making a bracha in the sukkah. When do we make the bracha in the sukkah? When we eat, and not if someone sleeps in the sukkah. Right, so again, it's an aspect of this. There might be some other reasons attached to that particular halacha, but it's another example of the same kind of concept. Vidavka, and also by another example, Ner Shabbat as well. In other words, where do we light? So we make sure that we light near where we eat. Vidavka le'inyan achsanai. However, the Mishnah Berurah says it's important to talk about. We're talking about a border. Hadal she'en beito etzlo, o le'inyan ben hasamuch al shulchan aviv. Right, so what are we talking about? Situations where you're joining together with the Baal HaBayit and you're eating where you're eating is where you're dealing with a person who's a member of a household, whether because he's a boarder or because he is an older child who's still, even though he has reached majority, but he's still basically is being supported by his father, by his family. Avamisha soed etzel chavero be'ekrai. However, if you're dealing with some person who is eating at a friend's by chance, meaning that, okay, you're invited over for a Chanuka party, and you're having a meal at the Chanuka party. It could be friends, it could be family, it could be whatever it is. V'yesh lo sham bayit be'oto ha'ir, and you're going to go home that night. Right? You're just there for the Chanuka party, and the Chanuka party is called for lighting time. Tzarich lelech lebeito lahadlik sham ner Chanuka. You have to light in your own home. And the imeno that says, as you hear the person and you're there at the party, but you still have to light in your own home. So he's talking about a situation where, right, one person is just, it's not a party where the family is invited, but it's a question of an individual who happens to have a business dinner or whatever it is, and they light. But if you're lighting at home, someone's lighting at home, so then you're yotzei. But that means that for us, in terms of the general practice, when you have a Chanuka party and there are people who are lighting, so either you can light beforehand, before you get there, whether it's if it's shkia or not, and b'diavad, I'm not talking about this, but earlier from Plaga Mincha time, making sure you have enough oil to burn until Tzeit HaKochavim, or you light when you get home. Okay, then there might be a question, which I'm not going to get into right now, what to do if you're going to get home very late. Right, but that's a different discussion that'll take us too far afield. But basically, the core halacha is that you should be lighting at your own home, and you're not yotzei with the lighting at the party. Okay, so all well and good until the 14th century. Right, generally things go south. Actually, the 15th century. Things go south in the 15th century. So here we have now a question in Germany in the Truma Tedeshen. Rabbi Yisrael Isserlein, very important posek, very influential posek for, in general, but specifically for Ashkenazic Jewry, quoted by the Ramah quite frequently. So he has a work called the Truma Tedeshen. Truma Tedeshen is a collection of responsa, very interesting on two parts. One is, besides the material itself, just by the framework, there are 354 chuvot, which happens to correlate with the gematria of Deshen. That's why he called it that. And so he has 354. Even more interesting is that he wrote the questions. In other words, it could be that they may have been based on questions that he received. But this was a work where he decided what the questions were going to be, what the answers were going to be, and then he put it in. It wasn't your typical responsa where the questions came from a field. But so he wrote his own questions, he wrote his own answers. And here's the question. But this one you can see that clearly had been going about. She'ela achsana'i shehu nasui. So if you have a boarder who's married, rishayu dadik bebracha chutz lebeito olav. But the Rabbi Zera said, okay, now I don't have to give my pruta. What happens if a person wants to light his own Chanukiah? Wants to light his own menorah, right? He's traveling on business, right? He's away from home, and he would like to light his candles, right? So he knows that his wife is lighting at home, but he wants to light his own. Can he? That's the question. So here he brings a very fascinating machloket. It also tells you a little bit about some of the family dynamics going on. Tshuva. Yireh did tzarich ledaptek b'davar. So that's such an easy question, he says. You have to think about this. Echad me'agdolim hora v'nahag d'rishai ladlik b'bracha. So one of the gedolim, he doesn't say who it was, indeed allowed people to make their own bracha, light their own menorah. So even though the Gemara says I don't have to, it means that he doesn't have to. But but if he wants to, so then he can. In other words, all Rabbi Zera was saying is I now don't have to, and minhag then was to only light, generally speaking, one per home. And so, okay, so it's either going to be with the balabayit or it's going to be with with my wife. So then I don't have to. But if you want to, you can. And it's not considered a bracha levatala, that it's one thing to light, so why are you making a bracha? Okay, but if you're yotzei with your wife, so then this is extraneous, this is superfluous, you shouldn't be making a bracha. No, you're able to do it. Dahavenami bichlal ha-mehadrin. So this is also considered within the role of the mehadrin. Now this takes us back, and I know that this was discussed last week, so I'm not going to go into it too much in depth, but it's very important to understand that this statement is radical. Right? It looks pretty innocuous, but it's radical. What do I mean by that? Yeah.
How do you know that your wife is lighting? How do you know she wasn't rushed to the hospital in an emergency?
Okay, so that's going to come up in the next line of the tshuva. Right? Okay, we're going to talk about all of that, I hope. Okay? But before we get there, I want to just understand the basis for it. Okay? Because those are technical issues. Important technical issues, but technical issues. I'm talking about now the heart of the matter. Because what I mean by what he says is radical. So let's take a look at the beginning of the daf. So the Gemara famously Generally speaking, I'll say very famously. I tell my Talmidim, I think I've mentioned this here as well. When I say something is famous, right? It's really annoying when people say something is famous because you don't know it, so then you feel stupid. But it's like I tell my Talmidim, when I say something is famous, it means that I know it. If I say something is very famous, then it means that they should know it too. So this is something which I will say is very famous. Tanu Rabbanan. Right, this is the bright that's brought, the very first source on the sheet. Number 1. Mitzvat Chanuka ner ishu beita. So the mitzvah of Chanuka is 1 candle per household. V'hamahadrin, and those who go beyond will say, ner lekol echad ve'echad. So then a candle is lit for each person in the family. Okay, 5 people in the family, 5 candles. V'hamahadrin min hamahadrin, and those who are over the top. So what do they do? Beit Shammai omrim. So Beit Shammai says Yom Rishon madlik shmona mikan ve'elach pochet v'olech. Beit Shammai says you start with 8 and then you go down. Beit Hillel, our practice, Yom Rishon madlik echad mikan ve'elach mosif v'olech. Then we start with 1 and we build up to 8. Okay. Fine. So that is the idea. What does this mean? What's going on here? So, as Harold said from the beginning, Ner Ishu Beito, this is a family or a household mitzvah. Okay? Now, there are other household mitzvot. Mezuzah, for example. Okay? There's a mitzvah on the house to have a mezuzah. This is, or ma'akeh, if you have a roof. So there's a mitzvah to build a fence around the roof. There are other things, but here you have something which I personally, we'll see if we get to it. I hope that we'll get to it. You can talk about whether it's a household mitzvah or of the house, of the property. But here, okay, so we're saying that you have a mitzvah of the house. What's a little interesting here, or maybe more than a little, is that we have 3 mitzvot that the Rabbanan have made, which are parallel in that they're all lifarsem hanes. They're all to publicize a miracle. But the 3 of them are, and they have another aspect that because, for example, which is an exception to the general rule of mitzvot aseh shehazman grama, of time-bound mitzvot aseh that women are exempt from, that here the Gemara says explicitly that women are also chayavot, they're also bound by this, and for the reason sha'af hen hayu ba'oto hanes, they also were part of the miracle. Different ways of understanding it, don't have time to get into it right now. But the idea that they're part of the miracle, fine, they have a chiyuv. So they're very clearly parallel. But the venue and the nature of the mitzvot are radically different. In other words, what are the 3? Ner Chanuka, Kriyat Megillah, and the 4 kosot on Pesach. Arba kosot on Pesach. So here, why do I say that they are radically different? Because Megillah is the one which is of the tzibur, right? You read the Megillah, you read the Megillah in shul, and we even say that, this has a discussion: can you have separate minyanim? Should you only have one large minyan? But it's a place where basically you're proclaiming the mitzvah, and that's the idea of the Megillah. On the other extreme is the mitzvah of Arba Kosot. That's an individual mitzvah. As opposed to the Seder. The Seder starts as a family mitzvah, right? The Korban Pesach. But when it comes to the Arba Kosot, you have to make sure each person has Arba Kosot. Each person has to drink, and it's part of another aspect of Pesach, which is Chayav Kol Adam Lirot Et Atzmo Ki'ilu Hu Yatzam Min Mitzrayim. Every individual has to view themselves as having left Egypt, and the Arba Kosot is the individual mitzvah. And in between, you have Chanuka, which isn't it's true, it's ideally at the public thoroughfare, but it's at the home, Ner Ish Ubeito. It's a family mitzvah, and it's not a public mitzvah. Right? We don't say, I think last year or 2 years ago I actually spoke about the idea of public lighting, shuls, Chabad, etc. Right? You would expect that to be the mitzvah. Light the Chanukiah the way that Chabad does. Right? But it's not. Right? You're not Yotzei with that lighting. You have to light it at your own home. Right? So it's not like Purim, and it's not like, obviously, it doesn't seem to be the individual. If it was the individual, then we couldn't even begin to talk about a wife lighting for her husband who's miles away. They couldn't even start to talk about that. It was like saying, okay, the wife is drinking her arba kosot. You don't have to drink your arba kosot. And we wouldn't say such a thing. So the idea of it being a household mitzvah is the key, and you can try to think of reasons for this. One that comes to mind is that it was a family that did this in the first place, Maccabim, in terms of Matityahu Banav. They were the ones who started it. You could say that the idea of Jewish identity and Shmirat HaMitzvot starts in the home. A lot of very nice ideas that you can come up with to explain it, and that's why this was the nature of it, right? As opposed to Purim, where it was being part of the nation of the Yehudim that lined you up for extermination. Right, so all of the different aspects you can understand why each of the mitzvot has its own particular angle, if you will. But it's, I think, a very important distinction to make. When you talk about, so that's Ner Ishu Beito. Now you talk about the Mahadrin. What did the Mahadrin do? The Mahadrin say, light 5 candles. Who's supposed to light 5 candles? Right? Every night you're lighting 5 candles. Why? Because there are 5 people in your home. Okay. So who lights the 5 candles? The Balabayit lights it. In other words, it's still the family. The Mahadrin is just simply saying, I want to tell you a little bit about the family that lives here. Right? This home that's keeping Chanuka, this family has 5, and that family has 8, and that family has 2. Well, there is a nature. We're telling you a little bit about the story when you take a look at the candles. On the other hand, what do the Mahadrim and the Mahadrin say? So now you light for the days. Who lights? So here there are 2 different shitot. Right? There's one shita, which is now the Sephardic custom. And the Sephardic custom is that you light 1 Chanukiah for the entire household, regardless of how many people that you have, and that happens to be also Tosfot in the Gemara. Another shir I would go into it, but I think it went into last week. And the Rambam, on the other hand, says, no, you light. He says he brings both minhagim. First he says that the way that I understand it is that you should light for each member of the family a full Chanukiah. So his example is if you have 10 people in the home, you light 80 candles on the 8th night. Okay, so that's what you're supposed to do. He says, however, here in Sfarad, the overarching custom in Sfarad is to only light 1 Chanukiah. And he doesn't try to stamp it out. And that's something which is also interesting, that the Rambam doesn't go, even though he thinks very strongly that the mitzvah is this, but he doesn't go to war against the other minhag. Fine. According to the Rambam, you're lighting your 80 candles, right? So then who lights the 80 candles? Right? So you would think, right, what we as Ashkenazim do. The Ramah actually says he's quoting the Rambam, but he's not quoting the Rambam. Ashkenazi, the Ramah says, and this is here in source number 5, V'yesh omrim dekol echad mibnei habayit yadlik. Each member of the family should light. And he says that's a Rambam. V'chena minhag pashut. And this is what our custom is. Okay? And that's what all Ashkenazim do to this day, as we know. But that's not what the Rambam said. The Rambam, if you read the Rambam carefully, the Rambam said the number 3 in the bold print in the first paragraph. Hamahader yater al ze v'oseh mitzvah min mufkar madlik ner lekol echad ve'echad v'layla harishon mosif olech b'chol layla v'layla ner echad. And then he says, it goes on, what happens if I have 10 people in family and I start with 10 candles and I end it with 80? Note what the Rambam said. He didn't say madlikim in the plural. He says madlik. Right? In other words, one person should light. Now, my own personal minhag, as I try to keep to the Rambam as well, is that let's say, based on the number of people, I actually, Baruch Hashem, we started with 8 children, so we still have the 8 children, thank God. But I'm going to say we started with lighting 10 Chanukiyot in the house, right? For all the family members, and along the Rambam, but each person, the Ashkenazic minhag is till each person lit their own Chanukiyah when they reach the age. When I have people who are still living in the home but are away from home for that particular night of Chanukah, so I'll light a Chanukiyah for them along the lines of the Rambam. Now we're down to 4, just my wife, myself, and 2 daughters who are still living at home. And even they are in dorms. But be that as it may, you can light for the people who are in the household, and that's what the Rambam is saying. Well, yeah.
Your wife lights separately?
No, she doesn't. All right, line 3. I didn't want to get into it. Right? It's like, there are two different minhagim there as well. My wife is much more conservative than I am. Small c. Anyway, that is that's the idea. But what I want to stress here is that before we get to the Ramah, there is unanimity. We don't break the family nature of the mitzvah. It's a question of how many candles to light and why. But it's still ishu beito. There's one person lighting, and the person generally would be the balabait, but doesn't have to be. There are even shitot, just to stress this idea, there are even shitot that say that the person lighting for the entire family can be a child, can be a katan. Now, normally speaking, you never allow a katan to allow someone else to be yotzeh mekayim their mitzvah. Never have such a thing. But here, the katan is acting as a representative of the family. He's part of the family. So, therefore, there's no reason why he can't, or she can't for that matter, light the candles for everyone, because they're part of the whole family.
This only for your mom?
What?
This is only according to mom?
This would be according to everyone, in terms of, let's say, certainly amongst the Sfardim, when you're only lighting one Chanukiyah per household, it would be, if you take the Rambam approach in lighting the multiple Chanukiyot as well. As I said, it's a machloket. There are those who say, no, a katan can't do it. So I'm not saying that this is something that should be accepted lahalacha, but the very fact that it is even raised as a serious option tells you a lot about the nature of the mitzvah. So this is what I would have said until now. Now I haven't I haven't looked too hard for it. It's on my to-do list now to really think about where is the first mention of it becoming an individual mitzvah, because all of this was background to reach back to that Trumat Hadeshen. So this is the earliest mention that I am aware of where the Ramah's position is actually being stated. Because if I'm lighting for myself, what am I saying? I know my wife is lighting for me, but I want to light, and I'm going to say a bracha. So what am I saying? It's an individual mitzvah too. In other words, what the radical shift here is that I can look at Ner Chanukah not only as a family mitzvah, but also as an individual mitzvah. And that we're willing to allow people to make the bracha. Now that's something which the Sfardim to this day won't allow. So for example, if you go to one of the later sources here on the sheet, number 18. Okay, this is number 18, and this is a short snippet from a tshuva of Rav Vadia Yosef, the Chavadat. It's on page 3 of the sheets. Asher al kain, gam im yirtzu bachurei yeshiva lahachmir al atzmam ulahadlik nerot chanu b'chadreihem. But even if the yeshiva bachrim, so you want to do it the best possible way, and the yeshiva bachrim want to light in their rooms for themselves. Einam risha'im levarech. Sheyesh bezeh chashash bracha levatala. Okay, what can you do? Sephardim are being influenced by their Ashkenazic roommate. They want to light as well. They can light, but they can't light with a bracha. Ki hinei marana beit Yosef hevi ma shekatav b'shut trumat hadeshen. So the Shulchan Aruch brings this trumat hadeshen that we're reading. V'chatav alav marana beit Yosef v'li nireh she'en lismoch al zeh levarech bracha she'ena bracha. What? Sorry? Okay. So this is, the Shulchan Aruch says, okay, I respect the Trumat Hadeshen, right? But he's an Ashkenazi. What can you do? And so, but we're not going to have a bracha. That's it, right? And here, by the way, the nature of this tshuva, just to explain to you how far this goes. There are those who disagree with this, but this is the Ravadio, and this is the general minhag. I know amongst many, we have. More than a few students from the Syrian community, and this is what they do as well. Whereas they're a Syrian community from Brooklyn, so they won't light their candles. They won't light candles, right? To be Yotzei, even though by the time their parents light in their homes, right, it's too late to be lighting here, right? Because it's a 7-hour difference. Right, you could have a situation in the other direction. That let's say in Australia they're lighting when it hasn't even reached Chanuka. It's not yet Chanuka on the first night, and they light the candles, and the candles have long burnt out. It's a 9-hour difference now to Sydney and to Melbourne. It's long burnt out by the time that it's time to light here, but they were Yotzei. In other words, we take this so far, right? It's not even Chanuka. And you're Yotzei your mitzvah when Chanukah begins for you, because someone lit where it was Chanukah time, okay? Because you're part of the family. So the idea now that the Trumat Hadeshen is raising, that this, to go back to that source, is it's raised quite innocuously, but it is really a radical break with what the Gemara seems to say. The Gemara seems to constantly keep the bracha, the mitzvah, as being a household family mitzvah, and now he's saying, well, if you want to make it an individual mitzvah, that's okay too, and you can even make it a bracha. And he says, why? Dahave bichlal hamehadrin. Right? He didn't say because you're going to view yourself as a separate household. He said because this is what the mahadrin meant, lighting for each person. So that's okay. That means that it became an individual mitzvah as well. That's the hidur. The hidur is that it's not just a family mitzvah, it's also an individual mitzvah. Yeah.
But one can argue that is a fallacious statement, because the Mahadran only actually applies and is relevant when it's all together with all of the others in the family, and in the whatever. So one could argue, no, this is nothing to do with Mahadran.
Correct. I agree with you.
On the other side of the world, that's not the
absolutely. But what he's saying is that his understanding of Mahadran means, why do you light a candle? Perhaps he would have said, who lights the candles? Remember, there are only 5 candles every night, 5 members of the family. Who lights the candles every night? Each one of them might light, perhaps. That's what he might understand it. And I'm telling you,
together.
Okay, fine. I agree with you. As I said, I think the simplest way of understanding is that it's, I don't know, fallacious might be too strong a term, but it's it's certainly arguable that it's a radically new reading of Mahadran. That is correct. Yeah.
I used to think, maybe when I was growing up, and the Chanuka was just, not so complicated. But now you're saying you got enough complication stuff, but okay. So like my brother now, I'm here, and my brother is in Philadelphia now, and it made me a little confused. Like, what am I supposed to wait for him? I don't understand what you were.
No, I'm trying to say the following: everyone lights where their light. If assuming where they are. At the time. What I was saying was that those people, the Sephardim still...
He's in Philadelphia.
Right.
And we're here.
Right. So the Sephardim was now. Presumably at our age, you have your household. He has his household. You're separate people, right? But
No, he's a student there.
oh, so
He's a student. He's in University of Pennsylvania.
your son,
And my son.
Okay.
And we're here.
right? So if you were Sephardim, okay,
Okay.
which you are, what?
What?
Are you Sephardim or Ashkenaz?
Ashkenaz.
Okay, so then Ashkenazim, everybody lights by themselves. He'll light, you'll light here,
I understood.
he'll light there. That's what Ashkenazim do. But what I'm talking about is the Sephardim. So the Sephardim, there's only one Chanukiah per family. Now there's a question amongst the Sephardi poskim.
Okay, so
If a person is living on his own in a dormitory, is he still part of the family, or is he now his own person? If he doesn't, so, and then they differentiate. There are those who differentiate between if he's earning his own living, he's not, if he's supported, etc., etc. But if he is considered part of the family, so you would light tonight, not tonight, a week on Wednesday night, you would light next Wednesday night, he's Yotze. Period. He's Bichlal. It's not Chanuka yet for him. But he's Yotze, and he should not light, certainly with a bracha, in Philadelphia. Okay? That's what the Sephardim would tell you. He could perhaps light without a bracha. He can answer amen to other people's brachos, but he shouldn't make a bracha. Because he was Yotze according to that position with yours.
You can say Shas Anisim, that was saying.
You can perhaps say Shas Anisim. I'm not going to get into that, but right, it sounds as though, by the way, is that he shouldn't say Shas Anisim according to most poskim. Right? Ad kidei kach, that if someone is lighting for them in their own home, then you don't say Shas Anisim. You only say Shas Anisim if you are a traveler and no one is lighting for you and you see a Chanukiah. Okay, that's the. But there are some who say you can say Shas Anisim, right? But it's better to answer amen to someone else's Shas Anisim. Yeah.
It seems to me so far removed from the Kada Shemin that was in by the Makkah in the Bet HaMikdash, and that was the Pesumah in Israel. And here we're going to Diukim, which
Okay, there's a comic routine which I'm sure many of you have seen, where somebody did the halachot of a Christmas tree. In other words, if Christmas was a Jewish holiday and there was a tree, what would be, should you string the lights right to left, but you light them left to right, all these things along those lines. You go through a whole thing. How high is the tree? Can you have an artificial tree? What happens? All these things. There's a very funny routine. You can, it's on YouTube. You can look at it. But by the way, having jokes aside, so Rav Soloveitchik, in one of his pieces, long before the routine was there, maybe that was the inspiration for the routine, I don't know, said that we are by definition, this is what religious Judaism is. This is what Orthodox, this is what halachic Judaism is. We are a part of the way that we tick is in understanding things from a legal perspective. And he even said that if the tree was a Jewish concept, we would have a Masechet of the tree. Right? So the Rav said it. So this is something which to understand it is we would have to, because again, we're taking it, you're right, it starts with a Kad Shemen, right? But, fire spread. Yeah.
So it seems to me that we're making a very clear distinction between Chagim and Shabbat versus Chanuka and the Chanukiah.
Absolutely.
You couldn't do what we suggested.
Correct.
I have to start Shabbat at 3 o'clock, at 1 o'clock in the afternoon when my family
Right. No, but
several hours ahead of me.
even more so. In other words, if you are away from your family for Shabbat, so every person has a responsibility to light Ner Shabbat wherever they are. Right, and that is that's universal. No, you can't be Yotze with Ner Shabbat that someone is lighting for you if you're not going to be in that locale. Yeah.
So the man is away the first night, his wife lights, but he also wants to light.
Second night he's still awake. Is he now obligated to light, or can he rely on his wife now?
Can you do it? It seems that each day, really good question. It seems that each day is a day in of itself. In other words, you can do it. Now, let's just read the Truma Deshen because we're reading to run out of time. And we're not going to get to all these Makorot, obviously, but I just wanted for you to understand the framework and the background of some of the halachot. So now, he continues. So the ode. So the first he says that it's Mahadrin, and then he says the following. Now I'm on the third line, right after the bold, the second word in the line. Va'od, or the fourth line, depending on where you start from. Va'od ikal mechash, and you also have another concern. Why should we tell a person to light? Your concern. Dilma mishtale in shebeite v'lo midlaikaleh. Maybe they'll be negligent back home, right? You have no way of knowing. It's not like today you can just with whatever text or phone call, whatever it is. So you have no way of knowing. Maybe they're being negligent and they're not lighting. Va'omer shekain ira lo pa'am achat. Indeed, this happened to him once. De'ihu lo madlik mishum davei somech alah. He relied on his wife. Ve'ihi nami lo midlaka, and she also didn't light. Mishum disvura hayta dehu yadlik aleh b'makom shehu. She thought that he was lighting. In other words, not everyone knows all of the finer points of the halacha, right? And she assumed, yeah, of course. Maybe she even said, maybe he even gave this shear, and he said, oh, it's a household mitzvah, and she said, okay, you're the balabas, so wherever you are, that's where home is. So you're lighting, right? But he didn't light, she didn't light, and they weren't Mekayim the mitzvah that year. V'nechlak alav. So he said, therefore, you should. It's a good thing for each person to light wherever they are. V'nechlak alav echad me'agdolim talmido. So another one of the gedolim, again he doesn't say who it was, who happened to be the student of the first one. V'amar dahoil v'lo tzarich u'patur min hadavar. Since you don't have to, and you're patur, im ken hayanikra hedyot im yaaseh. Then you're going to be called a simpleton if you do something. In other words, if you don't have to do it and you do it, you're not so smart. The kol shechein dehave bracha levatala, and all the more so that you are that you can't make a bracha, and if you do make a bracha, it's a bracha levatala. Keved delo eshkachan mahadrin ze betalmud. Since we don't find this as a mahadrin, in other words, the student says you're trying to expand this idea of mahadrin into a notion that it's a individual mitzvah. No. Mahadrin is a family mitzvah. That's the mitzvah. Sometimes people do it. Some people don't do it. Okay, but that doesn't change the nature of the mitzvah, and you can't change the nature of the mitzvah. So that was the argument of this person's student. So now what does the Trumat Hadesh and Rav Israel say? V'nireh de'oto tam shamar echad me'agdolim harishonim de'ikal mechash dilma mishtale inshei beitai. So he says the idea that we're going to be concerned that things are going to go wrong. I'm not going to read it inside because of the time. No, you don't have to worry about that. You're right. You have to teach people what the halacha is, and then you assume that people are doing it the right way, and you can indeed be yotze. You don't have to be concerned, and that's not a reason to start lighting your own candle, right? And he proves it from other areas as well, which he says are far weightier in halacha, right? That, okay, you assume that, this isn't one of his examples, but let's say you walk into a kitchen and you start eating, right? Because you can assume that your wife didn't make a mistake in basar b'chalav. You don't have to worry about it. So if you're going to rely on her for basar b'chalav, and rely on her for many other things, so of course you could rely on that she knows how to light a candle. So if she makes a mistake, every now and then somebody might use a milchik spoon in a fleshik pot. But that doesn't mean that now you can't go eat in that kitchen anymore, right? So this is the same. By the same token, this is the same idea.
Could you just go to Rob Lichtenstein that you...
I'll get to it in 1 second. Omnam. That's why I want to finish this. Omnam mitam mahadrin efshar v'yitaken shaper dami lahadlik bracha ki haygavin. This is now 4 lines from the bottom in the bowl. So he just says, however, from the first reason, the idea, what I call the radical break, that he accepts. No, so to the best of my knowledge, this is the first expression of the Ashkenazic minhag that we're all so fond of and we all are so familiar with, is being stated approximately 700 years ago, or 600 years, right? 600 years ago, in Germany. So this is the the idea, and he goes on to Kevin, and the last line, Kevin Deshkachan, just to make sure that you understand it. Talmud, Mahadrin, Ein ze kemosif al Talmud shuhu gorea. Right, that these are categories already established by the Gemara. So the question is, are they really categories established by the Gemara, or this is a new interpretation of the Gemara? In the few minutes that I have left, I just want to talk about another aspect. In other words, now would say everything that we've been talking about until now has been a question of, I'm in someone's home, can I rely on what's being done in my own home? All sorts of things along those lines, fine. But now what happens if you are not in a home at all? You're camping. You are a soldier who is, you're traveling, you're in an airport. You're a soldier out in the field. Can you light a Chanukiah? So if you have a situation where you are relying on your family, right, so you certainly can do that. Right? Though here too, for Ashkenazim, and I had many months when I was of Miluim age, so almost every year I had Chanuka. And it was just one time, finally I didn't get Chanuka, and everybody came down with mono. Basically, Hanukkah was cursed in family. So I always had Hanukkah duty, and I would rely on the one hand, I would know that I could rely on my wife lighting, but at the same time, because of the nature of that particular, I was on small outposts and motzavim, etc. But frequently I was the only dati soldier, so I would make sure to have a lighting for all of the chayalim who were with us at dinner time in the Cheder Ochel. Right, with that I was being Mekayim the mitzvah. It wasn't a public lighting; it was also a public lighting, but it was my own personal lighting as well. As a good Ashkenazic Jew, I was relying on the Ramah and on the Trumat Hadeshet. But let's say in those circumstances, I was as I said, I was in a building, and we had something which could be clearly considered to be a lodging area. What happens? How do you define lodging area? So here there is a really fascinating machloket that goes on. I will take the last source to be just to give you a quick summary of the different opinions. So most really. I think he's an outlier. There are other shitot. Mordechai Eliyahu, for example, agrees with Rav Lichtenstein in this. But Rav Lichtenstein made this very clear, and there's the following. However, a camper sleeping out in the open has nothing which falls under the rubric of bayit, unless he turns it into by means of a stay of a significant length. Indeed, if he sleeps in a recognized fixed campsite, he may light with a bracha even if his stay lasts only for that night. In other words, the campsite, I'm not sure from this is whether that it means that you're pitching a tent and you have a particular area or that there is some kind of cabins or the like. I think the former, but it's because the tent, even though it's a tent, is in an area where this can be considered permanent, because of the nature of the campsite. It is precisely this aspect of impermanence which, according to Rashi, causes the exemption of travelers on a boat. Rashi talks about people on the river boats in northern Europe seeing candles in wherever they were, and it's clear that the people on the boat didn't light, even though they were sleeping the night on the boat. Others want to say that's not a good example because the boats were open, you couldn't light on the boats, etc. Though it's hard to know. I once looked up to try to get a sense of what medieval riverboats looked like, to see which of those opinions was more correct. I think in this case, in this regard, Rav Lichtenstein is correct. I think that you were able to light if you wanted to, but of course, that also means that the captain of the boat would let you do that. having said that, by the way, this is a good example. So this already comes up in the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century. What does a person on a train do? So the Aruch HaShulchan, it's here if you want to take a look at it yourselves. I'm not going to read it inside. It's source number 20. The Aruch HaShulchan says that, light on the train. One candle, nobody's going to bother you. Later poskim even take this further. They say, this is in the days when there were still smoking sections on planes, right? So light a candle on the plane, right? Nothing's going to happen, right? Okay. And if they make you blow it out, okay, so that's not your fault, but you should light it on. Not, I don't recommend it today. But this is a sense. One second, you're on the plane, you're up for a few hours, and it's the fact that you're sleeping there. That's the point. According to that position, you're sleeping there. That turns it into your home, and you can light. By lo aleinu, someone who is homeless, right, and sleeping on the street. So according to that position, should light a Chanukiah wherever they're sleeping on the street. I can't, just imagining it. It's one of the sadder things that I can think of. But that is that position. Rav Lichtenstein goes to the other extreme. Rav Lichtenstein believes that no, if that you can't light unless you actually have a household. Not a household, a house. Meaning, I object therefore to the suggestion that travelers light on a truck, since it has walls and a roof. If you have chayalim who are on a mission and there's a truck and they can light in the truck, for the purpose of Chanuka candles, it is necessary to have a fixed dwelling place, regardless of the type of structure. Even though there are poskim, he recognized the Marsham, the Aruch HaShulchan, who require lighting with a bracha on a train or a wagon. My opinion is that this may be a bracha levatala. It's also quite plausible they're referring only to wagons and trains used for eating and sleeping. Though if you read the Aruch HaShulchan, I don't think that that's the case. I think he's talking about even a shorter journey. Though in my opinion, such vehicles would also not be considered houses unless the journey lasted more than 30 days. Right, so Rav Lichtenstein, Rav Mordechai Eliyahu are the extremes in saying that no, you need to have a actual dwelling place in order to light. In the other direction, you have the Tzitz Eliezer, you have the Rav Shlomo Zalman, who felt that a person who's even wherever you lay your head, that's your home. Basically, was that you can have a situation somewhere in the middle. I think the most poskim fall in the middle is that you have to have some kind of structure. So if you're sleeping in a tent and the like, so then you can light with your tent. But if you're sleeping out in the open, so then you can't light. Well, that's the. Well, I'm sorry. Right. Well, you can go camping if your wife's at home. And if speaking about my wife, that probably would be what would happen if I went camping. She'd stay home, right? So that would, so that would be the halacha. So Be'ezrat Hashem, we should all be zocha to be mekayim the mitzvah, the mahadrin min a mahadrin, however you define that. Okay.